Thank you for tuning in to Wednesday Inspirational Book Lounge. I'm your host, Anna Murby. Today we welcome back Pastor Hubert Carl as he reads to us the well-known Green Leaf in Drought Time, a harrowing missionary story of a family who gave up everything to do pioneering missions work in inland China. Enjoy the show.
Green Leaf in Drought by Isabel Kuhn, published by China Inland Mission, 1959. Read by Hubert Carl. This is the foreword. God does not waste suffering, nor does he discipline out of caprice. If he plows, it is because he purposes a crop. This book shares with us the secret of purposing and letting us see some of that crop. Peter counsels, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal coming among you to put you to the test. And the writer of Hebrew assures us that it afterwards yields, to those who have passed through its training, a piece of righteous life. So life apparently is meant to be a series of tests in the school of God. The tests he sends or permits are in reality his vote of confidence, for he undertakes not to allow us to suffer any testing beyond our powers to endure. In those he permitted Arthur and Wilda Matthews to experience, they discovered his beneficent purpose and transmuted them into occasion to bring glory to their God. God staked much on the faith and uprightness of Job, and allowed Satan to test him to the limit in order to vindicate his confidence. Roused Satan, purified Job, and edified Job's friends. Did he test these two children of his in China with similar ends in view, to show what he could do to his own when all other resources failed, to reveal the secret source of their greenness, to discomfort their enemies who found they could not starve God's children, to gloriously enrich and refine the temper of their own lives, and to strengthen the suffering Chinese believers who witnessed their triumph. This poignant story is written to the glory of God and to demonstrate what he can do to those who gladly embrace his will and accept his discipline, no matter how inscrutable. By J. Oswald Sanders. And now the introduction. It was July 23, 1953, when we first got the news. We were in base camp, Chiang Mai, North Thailand. In those hot countries, houses are built more for airiness than privacy. So John's shout rang through every room. Dr. Clark and Arthur Matthews are out, safe in Hong Kong. He had just received the telegram. I was crossing through the back hall on my way to the kitchen, but I stood where I was and shouted, "Praise God!" And from every room in the house we heard echoes of the same. Spontaneously, we all lifted our voices and sang, "Praise God from whom all blessings flow." I do not believe in all the years of our mission history in China Inland Mission, members scattered over the world in many continents had ever so spontaneously lifted up a song of praise with such unity of heart. It was not just that these long-tried and much tired brethren held by the communists in the farthest corners of northern China were now at liberty. It was that they were the last of our CIM family to be delivered. Now we could say, we, the largest Protestant missionary group in China, have all been brought through the Red Sea trial, and not one martyred. Why such grace had been vouchsafed to us, we could not say. But the song of gratitude impulsively ascended to our great giver of every good gift. I myself had slipped over China's back fence, so to speak, in 1950, and with our 6-year-old son had refugeed our way through the jungles of Upper Burma to the nearest post of civilization, and from thence home to America. Mr. Kuhn had stayed behind to care for the hundreds of new converts who were turning to the Lord in those days of terror. Safely on the shores of comfortable USA, I called it behind the plush curtain, I watched the other members of our mission scattered in far places, even to Tibetan borders, as the Lord brought out one family after another. In January 1951, the mission had given the startling order for complete evacuation, 101 adults and 284 children to be brought from distant parts of China, simultaneously, if possible, and conveyed home. Would the communists allow them all out? The funds for such an exodus, where would they come from? As we watched God's miracles take place in those days, I felt like the Apostle Paul, wrecked on the shores of Malta. They which could swim cast themselves first into the sea. That was Danny and I. We had the opportunity to escape and get to the land. The rest, some on boards, and some on broken pieces of the ship, and so it came to pass they escaped all safe to land. Paul had promised all should be saved. Lo, God has given you all them that sail with you. Acts chapter 27. I am sure Paul was among those who could swim. Had he not formerly a day and a night in the deep without sinking? So he would be among the first to get to land. As he stood there safe and watched the terrible surf and the bobbing heads of those who could not swim, clinging to flimsy boards and broken pieces of the ship, what were his feelings as he watched the struggles of the last two, the frightening roar and the dash of the surf, the helpless little black dots now in sight as their board was lifted to a crest, now completely submerged as it sank out of sight in the sea trough? As Paul watched the struggles of the last two, I am sure he was in continuous prayer. "Oh, Lord, you promised all with me should be saved, even though they do not seem to be making any progress, and they must be numb from the cold. I know they must be given strength to hold on. I believe God." For 2 years we had watched the last two, Dr. Rupert Clark and Arthur Matthews. For a while Mrs. Matthews and Lilla and Clark Preedy, held by the cold and cruel elements of the Red regime, which deliberately tried to starve them. Sometimes they sank into silence, and we stood praying with apprehension. Then again an unseen surge would fling out a letter, and we would catch every glimpse of them, alive and still clinging. But most amazing of all was their spiritual vigor. Whence came it? Not from themselves. No human being could go through such suffering and come out so sweet and cheerful. As I was in a small prayer meeting one morning, one prayed thus, "O Lord, keep their leaf green in times of drought." I knew in a moment this was the answer. Jeremiah 17:8 says, "He shall be as a tree planted by the waters, that spreads out her roots by the river, and shall not see when heat comes. But her leaf shall be green, and shall not be careful in the year of drought, neither shall cease from yielding fruit." That was it. There was an unseen source of secret nourishment which the communists could not find, and from which they could not cut them off. This is a story of that secret source. To add another book to the many telling the tales under communist pressure is not necessary and is not our purpose, but to tell the secret source by which a tree can put forth green leaves when all others around are dried up and dying from the drought. This is timeless. That is needed by all of us. Your drought may not be caused by communism, but the cause of the drying up of life's joys is incidental. When they dry up, can we find a secret source of nourishment that the deadly drought cannot reach? This book wants to suggest an answer to the ageless question of suffering men and women.
Thank you again for joining Wednesday Inspirational Book Lounge. Stay tuned for another installment next week of Green Leaf in Drought Time.